let's bring you in because, well, you're seeing the end of civilization.
Well, that's what the conference said, Brian, anyway. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was at a conference called the Academy, which is a yearly conference sponsored by an organization called Ideas Matter, which, for me, it was a great relief in a way to attend a non-woke, non-captured conference with an academic angle to it. So just as a reminder, I cover things a lot in real time on my Twitter. So if you don't follow me on Twitter and you'd like to do so, please do so at Diane UKC. That's DIANE UKC. So that was me on the first day of the conference, obviously being very academic with my glass of wine, in the evening only, of course. So it was really an interesting conference for a lot of reasons. And the title of the conference has a yearly theme, because it's a yearly conference, as I said, so that this year was called Civilization Under Siege, with a question mark at the end of it. So we're asking the question, is civilization under siege? And if it is, do we save it? Do we move on? Do we create something entirely new and start over again? So that was kind of the purpose of the whole weekend. One thing that is interesting to note, and just to say, of course, I have a PhD studying photojournalism, so I take a lot of photos when I'm going to do my reporting. So these are photos I took in my hotel room. And I thought it was interesting that for a non-woke conference, there were messages of sustainability and recycling in green everywhere, all over the room. So these are just 3 photos that I took from sustainability, do not disturb, I'm being green. They actually brainwashed you to the point of saying, if you don't want your towels changed today, we'll plant a tree in your honor. Just let us know and we'll put another tree up for you. But no, thanks. I want my towels changed when I'm in a hotel. So just a couple of the speakers that I wanted to highlight. So here's one from, this is a tweet from Professor Dennis Hayes, who's a good colleague of mine. He's the chair of the Academics for Academic Freedom, and I know him well. He's working with me on my case personally right now. And he took this photo of Andrew Doyle. So I learned a lot about Andrew Doyle. I only knew him from GB News on Free Speech Nation, if any of you watch him. But he actually has a doctorate from Oxford, and he was a lecturer at Oxford. So his talk was about literature and the arts and the death of the arts in the current era. He was amazing at quoting Shakespeare out of nowhere, and it sounded beautiful as it would, but he made a couple of interesting points about the arts, which is to say that there could be no sort of genius work taking place today in this era, because it's not possible, because the group identity is so much more important than the individual identity. So artists are no longer able to express themselves, so that, musicians such as Mozart or any of the other, artistic geniuses that we have in our past would not be able to do what they're doing now, because they would be suppressed for so many different reasons. And again, going along with that group identity. But really, the one of the main speakers that really got me interested was the opening keynote speaker, of Professor Frank Furedi, who is an emeritus professor at the University of Kent. And his entire lecture is available on his Substack, so that those links will be in the show notes. But just a couple of things that I wanted to say about what he said in this opening discussion, which kind of set the tone for the whole conference, was that one of the, going back to what Ben was saying about destroying history, if we have no history, we have no civilization, because civilization is developed throughout a history. And by going back and destroying history in various ways, a little bit more, which I will talk about in just a minute, we can't have a civilization. He talked about the process of de-civilization, which he feels is taking place now, especially with young people who are particularly captured by cultural Marxism. So that, for example, trans ideology is the opposite of civility in history, and in particular, the way the trans activists are behaving when they're going out and calling people names and, doing all kinds of degenerate things that we see happening in some of the Pride conferences and so on. And so the question is, what do we do about it, and do we do anything about it? And so that was a big part of the theme of the conference. I would say as well that one of my favorite sessions was called Reclaiming the Institutions, where they were talking specifically about universities and schools and the things that we've had for years and years in Western civilization. And something that a colleague of mine noted is that there was a very apparent lack of awareness of globalism and what globalism is doing to play a part in this process of what's happening to Western civilization. And so in my typical fashion, I asked a question that shut everybody up, which always seems to happen when I ask a question. And that was, since there were so many academics in the room, and I said, how many of us are willing to stand up and do something about this? Because all of our research funding comes from the UK government. We all know the association between Starmo and Davos, for example. So all of our funding is coming down from promoting globalism, promoting the sustainable development goals, and so on. And how many of us are willing to change our research, are willing to change what we're agreeing to teach in the classroom as a result of this need to fight globalism? Complete silence in the room. There were very few people, apart from my new colleague, who recognized the impact that globalism has on the topic that we're talking about. So something else that goes into a specific example of what I can certainly talk about is libraries. So if we go on to the next slide around the plot to turn the library into a safe space for indoctrination, that was another Substack post that Professor Furedi wrote and posted a few days ago. And I won't read this entire quote out here. You could read it yourself, but I think it's a really important point about this idea of decolonizing the library, which I've talked about on the column in previous segments. The idea of decolonizing the library basically means we're getting rid of our history. And by doing so, we're erasing the whatever has happened. We are now unburdened by what has been because we've deleted it, we've erased it, we've changed what's in our libraries, we've changed what we're teaching our children. And so by getting rid of this, we're trying, basically, Professor Furedi, and I agree with him completely, says that by erasing those things, we're not only erasing what we have developed in Western society and in civilization, but also setting the stage forward for cultural Marxism, because we are no longer unburdened by the past, right? And we can see this specifically. This has happened a few days ago, but I haven't been on the news in a couple of weeks. So just to catch you up a little bit, you might have seen this already, mainstream media, that Silip Wales, which is the professional body that I was mobbed out of, which is the professional body for librarians in the UK, had received £130,000 to tell librarians in Wales how to deal with the, quote, dominant paradigm of whiteness. This is, of course, Wales we're talking about, which is interesting. But they said basically don't have any meetings in buildings that might have a racist past. So they might be named after someone who has some sort of racism in the background. So we're not supposed to use those buildings and contribute money to them. You can go have a deep dive into what they talk about here on the CILIP website, Silip Wales Advocacy, Anti-Racist Library Collections. And of course, as we know, anti-racism is racism. It's just a different name for it. And just a couple of specific examples that I've got to share with you here. I was just out in my local Waterstones over the weekend and happened to see these are all children's books that are featured as like part of the featured new books that are out. You see consistently the rainbow being used, right? So it's easy to get away with saying, well, children like pretty colors, but there is rainbow. There is Greg the Sausage Roll. There is rainbow magic with the Toy Fairy. There is puppy corn. There is be normal. So that's the message of queerness being the opposite of normal, which is obviously part of the cultural Marxist agenda. And just to highlight what's going on in the States, just my last bit here, about what they're doing in libraries in general in America and in the UK, but in libraries in particular in the States are having a huge battle right now because there's a woman, Amanda Jones, who's written a book called That Librarian, and she's been promoting these kinds of books in her children's library for very underage children. And she wrote a book saying, oh, they've censored me and how awful censorship is. But at the same time, she would be one of those people to say, we can't have gender critical books in the library because those would be offensive to trans people. Brian.
Diane, thank you very much for that. And I'll just say to our audience that the content of each news that we produce is done by the individual presenters. And so the segment that we've just delivered, I think, is quite extraordinary because it's clear that between the three of us, we are all seeing the same pattern start to unfold in this country. And we will continue to warn our audience about what's really happening. Now, if you like what the UK column is doing, then please support us for £5 a month. That's membership basically allows us to do what we're doing. We want more people on board so that we can expand and produce more material. So if you can bring in others, that would be wonderful. Of course, the material we produce, we want it to be shared. We're trying hard on many platforms to do that. Facebook still doesn't like us, so we'll say we're shadow banned there. You can also help us by making a purchase in the shop. And if you haven't been to the UK Column shop, then please visit. It's for everybody. You don't have to be a member to make a purchase. And we'd still like to say we do have copies of Agenda 21, Your Life in Their Hands, still available. And we're getting such tremendous feedback from this first glossy brochure. There will be more. So if you want more, then please make sure you have bought one of these first editions. Now, tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we've got Discussing the Second Climate Masterclass. This was a very popular initiative which Mike Robinson set up, and it's been so popular that the second Climate Masterclass is being introduced there at 1 o'clock tomorrow. We'd also like to say we're getting really excited for the 19th of October in Bristol for the UK Column on Location. We've got some great speakers coming in. We've got Piers Robinson, David Miller, Peter Ford, Bob Moran, the cartoonist, Ahmed Malik, Katie Jo Murphy, Claire Wills-Harrison, and there are more, which we will announce. So if you haven't got a ticket, please buy one and come and join us. And yes, we do look forward to meeting and speaking with as many people as we can. What else have we got? We've got UK Column at the International Centre for 9/11 Justice, Aviation Impossibilities, Deconstructing the Official Story of the 9/11 Hijackings and Air Defence Failures. And that'll be going out Sunday, September the 8th, 6 to 10 p.m. BST. So watch out for that. And what does that take us to? Oh, yes, the Heritage Party are running a conference. They kindly invited Mike Robinson and myself to speak, which we're delighted to do. So that's Saturday, the 28th of September, and the venue is in Reading. It is a ticketed event, but you can go online and sort out the details for that for yourself.